Okay, so in the previous lesson, we have learned about how groups being formed. And now we try to understand the influences coming from different people. Sino ba ang nakakapag-impluensya sa atin bilang isang individual sa isang grupo? Okay? So, magbigay nga kayo ng mga example ng mga tao o kaya ng mga grupo na tingin ninyo hanggang ngayon meron pa rin silang impluensya sa inyo. Sige. To be added as your yun, to be added as your recitation for this morning. Sir, yung pamilya ko po, kasama po yun, sir. Yung friends ko po, sir, ganyan. O kaya, sir, yung mga kabanda ko po, ganyan. Sir, yung mga churchmates ko po, mga ganyan. So, these individuals try to influence the way we behave. No? O kaya naman, dati, sabi ni nanay, hindi ka naman dating ganyan. Hindi ka naman dating ganito. Ayan. So, influensya ang tawag sa magulang natin sa kanila. No? Nak, ang bait-bait mo dati. Pero bakit ngayon, ganito ka ng ugali mo? Ganyan, sabi nila. So, influence ang tawag natin doon minsan. No? O kaya naman, churchmates. So, dati, hindi tayo madasalin. Pero ngayon, no? Nagpupunta na tayo sa church, nagdadasal na rin tayo. O kaya naman, we communicate our emotions, our thoughts, no? Pati yung mga future actions natin, ipinagdadasal natin. Ayan. Dati meron akong kaibigan na hindi siya madasaling, hindi rin siya pala simba. Pero simula nung nagkaroon siya ng mga kaibigan sa Christian community, yung mga classmate din namin, no? Yun. Naging madasalin siya. Nagulat na lang ako kasi nung high school kami, hindi siya ganon. Pero nung nagkaroon siya ng mga ganong kaibigan at influensya, naging madasalin siya. Pag-uusapan natin. Okay. So when do people conform in a group? So do you have any idea? Ano ang ibig sabihin ng conform or conformity? So, sige nga, sir, ako naalala ko po yan sa namin, sa social psychology namin. O yan, conformity. Ano kaya ang ibig sabihin ng conformity? Sige nga, anong ibig sabihin ng conformity para sa inyo? Ano yung pagkakaunawa ninyo sa pag-conform, di ba? Kapag meron kayong kaibigan, nagko-conform kayo. O kaya naman, merong kayong project, tapos merong isa sa mga meron kayong isa sa mga members ng grupo. Okay? Nagko-conform kayo. Ibig sabihin ng conformity para sa inyo. Okay, usapan natin yung mga yan. So this is just a demonstration or video wherein a group of group of jurors, no, try to understand the situation, and then one way or the other, a group or an individual tend to affect the way they decide over a situation or over a case, right? So, ang nangyari dito, minsan, merong isang tao na nakakapag-impluensya ng maraming tao o kaya ng isang grupo. Kaya naman minsan, yung grupo ang nagbabago ng paniniwala natin o kaya ng behavior natin. Dati, unang wala pa tayong trabaho, let's say for example, hindi naman tayo dating ganon. Pero na-impluensyahan tayo ng ating mga workmates. O kaya naman tayo, yan, ang tahi-tahimik ng klase natin dati. Tapos, nung dumating tayo sa buhay nila, yan, gumulo, parang na-impluensyahan natin sila. Okay, so ano lang yan minority, tapos papunta sa majority, o kaya naman yung majority, papunta dun sa minority. This is how an individual or a group tend to influence the group behavior. Kaya, punta naman tayo dito again with the majority influence. Okay? So majority influence, this is a social pressure exerted by a larger portion of a group. Diba? So yung mas marami na i-influensyahan yung isang tao. Nakaranas na ba kayo ng majority influence? Yung ayaw ninyong gawin, pero na-influensyahan kayo ng maraming tao. Halimbawa, kasi namin sa religion namin dati, bawal kang kumain ng ganito, bawal kang kumain ng ganyan. Majority influence yun. O kaya naman, sa grupo, sa klase ninyo, sabi, huwag na tayo pumasok sa ganitong subject. Sabi, ngayon mangyayari, majority influence, hindi ka na rin papasok. Ikaw gustong-gusto mong mag-aral, gustong-gusto mong mag-recite, gustong-gusto mong mag-participate sa class recitation. Uy, bida-bida ka naman, bakit ka nagre-recite? Oh? So, ang nangyayari dito, yan majority influence. O, na-influence tayo, ay, mali bang mag-recite, ay mali bang mag-participate sa class. No? So, this is majority influence. So, a group or individual members and smaller factions within the group. Ano naman yung minority influence? So, minority influence, social pressure exerted by lone individual. Halimbawa, no? Yung isang tao, na-influensyahan niya yung mga classmates niya. Dati, tahimik ng klase. Tapos lahat behave. Ano? Dumating siya sa buhay ng mga classmates niya. Yan. Nag-iingay na. Sino dito yung ganito? Meron tayong isang classmate na parang siya nagbibigay ng liwanag, siya nagbibigay ng daan patungo dun sa the way we behave. Sabi ng isa, hindi kaya mag-suggest tayo kay sir. Gawin na rin natin group work ito. Yan. Nag-suggest ka ngayon. Yan, na-trigger ka ngayon. Sabi mo, no? Parang pakiramdam ko kasi hindi ko kaya mag-isang gawin itong trabaho na to. Yan. Minority influence ang tawag natin dyan. An individual or smaller faction of a group on members of the majority of faction. Kasi nga, magbigay kayo ng example ng isang tao o kaya naman isang influencer na tingin ninyo malaki yung impact sa pagbabago ng society na meron tayo. Magbigay nga kayo ng isang tao sa kahit sa Pilipinas o kaya sa ibang bansa. This individual try to comprehend the system or the flow of the way we behave in a group, and then yun binago niya yung sitwasyon, diba? O sa politika, yan. O kaya naman sa music, o kaya naman sa tech industry. Ibig sabihin, dati ganito yung ginagawa nila. From the moment na pumasok siya doon, he's a visionary businessman, halimbawa, pumasok siya sa ganitong game, o kaya naman sa ganitong industry, o nabago yung kanilang pananaw because of his or her opinion. O kaya naman sa music, kasi nga, magbigay nga kayo ng example ng ganitong mga tao na nagbigay daan sa pagbabago ng sistema. Sir, ako po, nabago ko po yung mga classmate ko to. Yan. Bakit? O bakit hindi? O, diba? Halimbawa, no? So, yung bagong natin, yung Nobel Prize, Nobel Prize winner, si isang sa journalism. Okay? So yan, ito yung mga tao na nagbabago ng takbo ng sistema. Okay? So this figure right here is the way an individual, so yan, yung makikita ninyo, an individual try to influence other people or multiple of individuals, or a collective of individuals try to influence the individual. Yan. Dati, hindi ka dati nagko-computer. Tapos ngayon, nagko-computer ka na. Dati, hindi ka naglalaro ng computer games. Pero, simula nung sumama ka sa mga classmate mo, nagko-computer games ka na rin. Dati, hindi ka nakikinig ng rock music. Pero ngayon, nagsisimula ka na makinig ng rock music. So, this is what we call majority and minority influence. Okay. Yan. So, ito yung tinatanong natin kanina. Ano po ang ibig sabihin ng conformity? So, isang troll. So, conformity, a change in opinion or judgment or action to match the opinions or judgments or actions of other group. Sabi nga natin, we go to the flow. We go with the flow. Actions of other group members or the group's normative standard. Yan. So, nagbabago minsan yung pananaw natin o kaya naman nagbabago yung judgment natin kasi we try to conform in a group. Ayaw natin mapapahiya. Ayaw natin na we go against the group. Ayaw natin na magkakaroon tayo ng kaaway, di ba? Sa sa previous lesson natin. We are social animals. Gusto natin meron tayong sense of belongingness. But of course, this is not always true. No? Merong mga tinatawag na blind conformity. Familiar ba kayo sa experiment ng blind conformity? Ayan. So sa blind conformity, alam mo na mali yung ginagawa ng mga kasama mo. Alam mo na tama yung sagot mo. Pero dahil yun yung majority ng sinasabi ng mga tao na kasama mo, nabago tuloy yung opinion mo, nabago yung sinabi mo, nabago yung judgment mo. Halimbawa, yan, familiar ba kayo kay Solomon Ash? Sir, di ako familiar yung kay Solomon Ash. So, ito yung mukha ni Solomon Ash, halimbawa. No? So, imagine ninyo is a social psychologist. No? He tries to understand the way individual tend to change his or her judgment based on the influence of other people. Magbabago kaya ang paniniwala ng isang tao kapag meron siyang kasamang iba na taliwas doon sa tamang pananaw. Diba? So ito yung ipinapakita halimbawa ni Solomon Ash sa left side, no? Yung itong figure na to. Ito naman yung pagpipilian, A, B, or C. Okay, so you can visit the material. I-upload na lang natin ito. A, B, or C. Oh, sa tingin niyo, ano yung kaparehas nitong nasa left side? Kung kayo ang magde-decide or kung kayo ang makakakita nito, ano yung kaparehas ng nasa left side? Is it A, B, or C? Yan, napatanong tuloy, hindi pa sigurado. Yan. Okay, so halimbawa, no? So ito yung tamang sagot, halimbawa, siya yung kaparehas ng figure na nasa right side. Pero sabi ng mga kasama mo, hindi, letter B. Yan, sabi ng isa naman, oo nga, letter B, ganyan. So lahat sila letter B, ikaw na ang letter C. Tapos napatanong ka sa sarili mo, bakit ba't letter B, letter C naman, obvious naman letter C yan, di ba? Letter C, nakita niyo letter C, di ba? Pero, yun yung experiment ni Solomon Ash. Magbabago ba yung opinion ng taong to kapag ayan, sabi, na-experience niyo ba na-experience niyo ba dati yung elementary kayo, uy, itatago ko yung yung gamit ni ganito, huwag mong sasabihin ganun. Ikaw naman, na-influensyahan ka, sige, di ko sasabihin. Tapos ngayon, ang gagawin mo, yan, nag-conform ka ngayon. Nabago yung paniniwala mo. Kahit na alam mong mali, kahit alam mong masasaktan o tinago yung gamit ng classmate mo, nakita mo ba yung cellphone ko? Nakita mo ba yung bag ko? Di ko nakita. Kahit alam mo nakita mo. Yan. Hindi mo sasabihin. Kasi nag-conform ka. Yan. O pagka uwian, umiiyak na kasi saan nyo ba nilagay yung bag ko? O kaya naman, naglagay ng basura. O sino yung nakaranas dito ng nilagyan ng basura yung bag nila ng elementary? No, di ba? Sakit sa pakiramdam ng Sino ba naglagay ng basura sa bag ko? Ganon. Kasi, yan, hindi mo sasabihin kasi kahit alam mo na mali yung ginawa ng tropa mo o kahit na alam mo mali yung ginawa ng classmate mo, hindi ka magsasalita kasi nag-conform ka. Kasi ayaw natin na baka hiwalayan tayo ng tropa natin. Uy, di na tayo kaibigan, talo-talo pala tayo, ganyan. Diyan nagsisimula minsan yung mga maling desisyon natin sa buhay with a blind conformity. Yan, sabi ng teacher, okay, please pass your assignment. Kasi pinaalala ni ganito. Yan. Tapos sabihin sa ng mga classmates, uy, ba't mo pinaalala kay sir? Ba't mo pinaalala kay ma'am? Yan. So nagkaroon tayo ng isang conformity, hindi mo na nasasabihin next time. Kasi baka mamaya, sabihan ka ng killjoy ng mga classmates mo. Diba? Ganon. Yan. So minsan, alam nating tama, pero pinipili natin na mag-conform sa grupo. Okay. So Ash situation is an experimental procedure by Solomon Ash in his studies of conformity to group opinions. So participants believe that they are making perceptual judgment as part of a group. Yan. Tingin nila, perceptual experiment ito, pero hindi. Kasi ang orientation ni Solomon Ash dito, titingnan natin kung gaano ka-accurate ang perception o yung paano kayo tumingin sa mga objects na to. Yan. Pero yun, minanipulate ni Solomon Ash yun. He tries to manipulate the opinion of the majority of the group. And then there's an individual who will be part of the experiment. Magbabago kaya yung kanyang opinion. But other members were Confederates who made deliberate errors on certain trials. So, yan. Mamaliin talaga nila yun. So yan yung example natin. Okay? Yan. Punta naman tayo sa social impact theory. Now, social impact theory is an analysis of Latini, which proposes that impact of any source of influence depends upon the strength and immediacy and number of people present. No, minsan, nagkakaroon tayo ng pagbabago ng opinion because of these particular factors o yung strength. Gaano kalakas yung influensya nila. Kapag ba humiwalay ka sa grupo, kaya naman kapag ka meron kang hindi ginawang ayon sa standard nila, ano kayo mangyayari sa akin? O, di ba? May threat, halimbawa. Meron tayong minsan immediacy. Gaano natin kailangan para mag-conform na tayo. No? Kailangan ba natin gawin agad yung action na yon? Wala ka ng choice, halimbawa. So, immediate need na ito. Now, this is one of the factors. So, kaya naman, number of people. So, sobrang dami na nagsasabi na yes, pero ang sagot talaga ay no. Ayan. Halimbawa, dun sa Squid Game, sabi no or yes yung sasagot nila. Pero nahati yun. Ayan. Pero kasi syempre, minsan daw ang tao, natural na gusto magkaroon ng pera, sabi nila mag-stay na lang sila, halimbawa. No? So, gano'ng karami yung nag-agree, gano'n naman karami yung ayaw magtuloy sa game. Halimbawa, o punta naman tayo sa compliance. Ano ang pagkakaiba ng compliance at ng tawag dito, ng conformity? Sa conformity, yan, nabago talaga yung opinion mo. Kaya naman, sa compliance naman, privately maintain your original beliefs. Okay? So change occurs when the target social influence publicly accept the influencer's position. Punta naman tayo sa conversion. Now, conversion, change that occurs when group members personally accept the influencer's position. Also, the movement of the members of a group to a single mutually shared position. Convert ka ngayon. From point A to point B, nagbago yung nagbago yung yung personal belief mo. Now, initially offer diverse opinions on a subject, eventually come to share the same position. Okay? So we also have congruence or unprompted or agreement between the individual and the group. We also have independence. Yeah, so expressing opinions, making judgments, or acting in ways that are consistent with one's personal beliefs, but inconsistent with the opinions or judgments or actions of other group member or the group's norm. Okay, from the word itself, independence. Okay, you have your own opinion, you have your own take on a situation. So we also have anti-conformity or what we call counter-conformity. So you are deliberately expressing opinions, let's say, for example, making judgments or acting in ways that are different from those of other group members or the group's norms in order to challenge the group and its standards rather than simply the purpose of expressing one's personal preferences. Yeah. So we have discussions in a group, and then we try to understand how we would behave in a certain situation. So let's say, for example, you have a discussion. So before discussion, you might disagree with a group, and then you have this private position after the discussion. You would really disagree with the group. No? Pero eventually, because of the public position after the discussion, you would agree eventually. So this is what we call compliance. So publicly agrees with the group but privately disagree. Halimbawa, sabi nila, ganito ang iboto ninyo, kasi ganito ang iboto nyo, kasi ganito ganyan, ganito yung kanyang mga accomplishment and all. So, sa paniniwala mo personally, you have your own take about that person or about that politician, and then you just have to comply kasi baka there might be some harm that is impending. Or before the discussion, maybe you would disagree with the group and then agree with the group with a private position after the discussion. So nagkaroon kayo ng exchange of the discussion. So nag-agree ka and then eventually nag-agree ka talaga in publicly yan. Nag-convert ka ngayon. So diba sa religion, di ba? Iba yung paniniwala mo na kinalakhan and then sabi, ganito, punta ka sa sa kung ano namin, sa meeting namin, ganyan. Tapos, nagkaroon ng discussion and all, tapos nagbago ngayon yung opinion mo totally, no? Nagkaroon ng conversion na tinatawag. So disagrees with the group, let's say for example, and then disagrees with the group, and then disagrees with the group again. Yeah. So possibly, na hindi mo binago yung opinion mo or yung perspective mo. So you are independent. Yeah, independence ang tawag natin dyan. Okay. So agrees with the group. So likely you are neutral halimbawa. So agree again. And then eventually, yan, nag-disagree ka sa grupo. So anti-conformity naman tawag natin dyan. Disagree with group publicly but agrees or has no opinion or interest privately. O kaya naman, yan, meron tayong totally agree from start to public position yan, after the discussion. Congruence naman ang tawag natin yan. Okay. So there are some researches that suggest that there are several factors on how a person would probably conform in a group. So let's say for example, these characteristics may include age. Yan. Meron din namang authenticity, okay? Authoritarianism in terms of big five factor personality. So introverts experience more discomfort. Yan. So sino dito yung yung tingin nila sila ay introverted. Okay? So parang feeling natin, di ba? You are in a discomfort kapag ka merong influence coming from other people when disagreeing with a group, and so conform more. So likely when you are introverted, as this study suggests, of course this is not universally true, no? But there are some just researchers which suggest that this is might be true to some. So but openness with less conformity, openness to experience. Okay? O kaya naman, birth order. O yan. Sino sa mga magkakapatid ang most likely magko-conform sa grupo? So, halimbawa, firstborn children, no? Firstborn child, so born child, tend to conform more than later born children. Kasi yung expectation coming from the parents. Sino yung mga panganay dito? Yan, di ba? Sabi kasi ni nanay, kaya sabi ni tatay, ganito, ganyan. Ganito yung kuning kong kurso, o kaya naman alagaan ko yung ganito ko ang yung mga kapatid ko. So they try to conform more. So who tend to be more rebellious and creative. Sometimes yung mga, yung mga nasa middle, pati yung mga, tawag dito, yung mga bunso. Sino yung mga bunso dito? Yan. Sabi, kayo, mga rebellious daw kayo and creative. So unlike firstborn, you try to conform more. Meron din tayong dependency, gender identity, individualism versus collectivism, individuation, intelligence, or need for closure sometimes, need for uniqueness, self-blame or self-esteem, meron din. So self-monitoring, kaya naman, yes, say. Alright. So these are the factors that tend to something of group and situational characteristic that reliably increase and decrease conformity. Okay, so let's say, for example, in terms of accountability, an individual may strive for acceptance by others whose preferences are known. So the conformity tend to increase kasi ayaw niyang baliwalain siya ng grupo, kaya naman mga kasama niya. So bababa naman yung conformity, the individual is accountable for their actions and are striving for accuracy. Okay, the same goes with other factors right here: accuracy, ambiguity, anonymity, attraction, availability of mating partners or mating partners. We also have awareness, cohesion, commitment to position, and as well as commitment to membership, existential threat, priming, as well as the size of the group. So nakaka-apekto rin pala yung gaano kalaki or gaano kaliit yung grupo na sinasalihan natin. No? How we try to conform in a group. So we have a task and unanimity. Okay. Okay. So you also have crash field situation. Now, crash field situation, It is also a study of conformity. So participants were signaled their responses using an electronic response. Console believed that they were making judgments as part of the group. Akala nila, dun sa study, no, parte sila ng grupo, pero online ito. No? Pero hindi alam ng mga members o nung participant ng experiment na ano to, simulated ito. Naka-program na kung ano yung magiging respond ng machine. So akala nila merong sumasagot, tapos hindi yung susundan nila or hindi. So ano ang tendency ng individual online kapag majority ng mga group or majority ng mga individuals, ganito yung decision. So nagbabago kaya ang opinion ng isang tao kapag siya ay online? But the responses of other members that appeared on their consulted display were simulated again. So right here, makita ninyo, naka-online sila. Tapos pagpipilian nila kung ano yung shape. Okay, conformity in crash field situations. So crash field study conformity by seeking subjects, individual booths, and gathering their responses electronically. Okay, so when asked a question such as which one of the figures has a greater area, the star or the circle, kung kayong titingin, anong mas malaki yung area dito, yung circle o yung star? Yan. So parang ano rin pala to, sa Squid Game, papipiliin kayo ng shape. Ano kayo mas malaki dito, yung circle o yung star? Yan. So they thought that their answers were being transmitted to the experimenter or the other subjects, but in actuality of the experiment was simulating the majority's judgment from a master control panel. So gaya nung kay Solomon Ash, yan. Marami yung nag-agree halimbawa sa star. Pero yung sagot mo circle. Kasi parang mas malaki yung circle eh. Parang nag-fit yung star na yan dito sa sa circle. Paano mas malaki yung star? O, halimbawa, majority ng nagsabi star. Magbabago kaya yung opinion mo. So possibly, yung gagawin natin. Pipiliin natin siguro yung kung ano yung majority na sabi ng iba. Ay, baka mali yung judgment ko. Nagtanong ka ngayon, halimbawa, sa sarili mo kung tama ba o mali ang sagot mo. So this is what we call the clutch fields situation. We also have individuals in groups engaged in computer-mediated interactions conform o traits equal to and sometimes greater. Yan, no? Minsan daw, mas mataas pa yung tendency natin na mag-conform online rather than face-to-face. So this is what we call the social identity model of the individuation effects or what we call the side effects. Okay? Dahil online tayo, we tend to have this the individuation. Okay, so the individuation effects. Alright, so we also have idiosyncrasy credits. So according to Hollander, explanation for leniency, groups sometimes display toward high-status members who violate group norms. So minsan pinapaboran natin kung sino yung mas nakakataas o kaya sino yung merong status sa grupo natin. Kahit alam natin na medyo tagilid yung decision niya. So hypothetical interpersonal credit or bonus that is earned each time the individual makes a contribution to the group but is decreased each time the individual influences others or make errors or deviates from the group's norm. So when do people resist the group's influence and instead change the group? Okay, kayo, anong sagot niyo rito? Kailan kaya ang isang tao o yung mga tao resist the group's influence? Kayo. Halimbawa sa discipline natin sa religion. Yan. Ito yung kinalakhan natin halimbawa o kaya naman sa impluwensya ng mga kaibigan natin. Kailan dapat o hindi dapat sumunod sa daloy ng grupo? Kaya kayo nga, magbigay nga kayo ng example na kung saan dapat stop na natin kasi parang mali. Parang gano'n. Sige, give nga kayo ng example. Kailan tayo dapat huminto sa daloy ng pagsunod natin sa isang grupo? Okay. Now we have Moscovici's conversion theory suggests that consistent minorities will be influential. Okay, although that influence may in some cases be indirect and delayed, minorities therefore create more conversion and innovation, whereas majorities tend to create compliance. Okay, so according to Moscovici, there are times that if you are persistent with your take or your opinion or your perspective, you try to influence other people eventually. We also have Latinis dynamic social impact theory. Now, uses the processes of consolidation, clustering, correlation, and continuing diversity to explain majority and minority influence in spatially distributed groups that interact repeatedly over time. Yan. So again, bakit kaya nagko-conform ang mga tao? Bawa, siguro dahil ayaw nating ma-reject, siguro ayaw natin na parang nakahiwalay tayo sa grupo. Diba? Minsan, ayaw nating itakwil tayo ni nanay o kaya ni tatay kasi baka mamaya kapag hindi ko sinunod yung gusto niya, palayasin ako, hindi ko pa naman kaya mag-isa. O kaya naman, sila yung support system ko. Ba't ako tatanggi sa offer nila, halimbawa? So we try to conform because kayong makakasagot, bakit kaya nagpo-conform ang mga tao? Now we have different influences coming from individuals or groups that we are in. Now we have informational influences. So this might include the communication and persuasion. These are direct. And some indirect could include social comparison processes. Now, these interpersonal processes promote change by challenging the correctness of group members' beliefs or the appropriateness of the behavior, direct or indirect. Now, we also have a normative influence. So, prompts the group members to feel, think, and act in ways that are consistent with their group's social standards. Okay? We also have interpersonal influence. To include verbal and non-verbal tactics. Diba? Magko-complain kayo o kaya magde-demand kayo. You try to threat the group. Kapag hindi natin ginawa ito, huwag na natin gawin. Aalis na lang ako ng grupo. Ganyan. So pleading and negotiating, pressuring, manipulating, rejecting, and so on. So designed to induce change. Diba? Ang ginagawa ng ibang grupo ng mga tao, kaya grupo ng mga tao, no? They try to change the system in terms of what they could, no? Yung mga nabanggit natin, they try to do these things. No? They also have false consensus effect. So perceivers' tendency to assume that their personal qualities and characteristics are common in the general population. So false consensus effect ang tawag natin doon. Akala natin, tama yung paniniwala natin based on what we see. Okay? Based on what we observe with the others. We also have dual process theories of influence in general, a conceptual analysis arguing that individuals change in response to direct forms of influence such as persuasion. Halimbawa, tawag dito na na-influensyan ka ng salesman, napabili ka ngayon, and indirect forms of influence such as mimicking another's response. So, ginagaya naman natin, halimbawa, yung ginagawa ng ibang tao. Okay, we also have heuristic. Okay, heuristic, it is a mental shortcut. So, inferential principle or rule of thumb that people use to reach conclusions when the amount of available information is limited, ambiguous, or contradictory. Sino ang iboboto ninyong presidente? Why? Sige nga. Sino ang ibobotong presidente ng mga ng mga students natin halimbawa? Sir, hindi pa ako sigurado. Yan, hindi pa po ako nakapag-research. Sir, wala po akong kinalaman niyo, sir. Wala po akong pakialam kung sino maging presidente. Minsan, ambiguous tayo. Hindi natin alam kung sino iboboto natin kasi And parang hinahayaan na lang natin yung iba na magkaroon ng power over the situation ng ano natin, ng bansa natin. Halimbawa, sir, labas na po ako dyan. Psychology pa rin po ba yan, sir? O, minsan, di, nawawalan ng budget yung isang institution because of the priorities that the politics have, no? Halimbawa, naalala ninyo tinanggalan ng budget yung tawag dito. Anong agency yun yung tinanggalan ng budget? Yung basta something with human rights. Tinanggalan sila ng budget kasi there could be some possibly other priorities over human rights. So kayo, nasa field ng psychology tayo, no? So more likely human rights tayo. Sino ba yung anti-human dito? Kumbaga, no, so we try to understand the platforms of different individuals or group of politicians. No? Now, pagdating ng halalan, hulaan na lang ninyo kung sino yung magiging presidente ninyo o kaya yung mga senador ninyo kasi hindi ninyo alam kung sino yung iboboto ninyo. Yan. So, this is what we call ambiguity and we try to have a mental shortcut. Yung tinatawag natin na heuristic. Ito na lang si ganito kasi siya yung nakikita ko sa Facebook lagi tsaka sa YouTube. Yan yung tendency natin minsan eh. Okay, si ganito na lang kasi ito yung sabi ng nanay ko, ito yung sabi ng religion ko. Nagkakaroon tayo ng heuristic na tinatawag. We try to have a mental shortcut to conclude with some circumstances. We also have normative influence and natin pala itong mga ito. Now, subjective group dynamics. Okay? Psychological interpersonal processes that result from social categorization and identification processes, including members' desire to sustain the positive distinctiveness of in-group and the validity of its shared beliefs. Okay? Yan. So, nabanggit natin dati yung, yung scapegoating. Ano pagkakaiba ng scapegoating sa black sheep effect naman? So, the tendency for group members to evaluate a group member who performs an offensive behavior more harshly than an out-group member who performs the same offense. So, minsan, mas pinapagalitan ka ng nanay mo kapag may nagawa kang mali. O, bakit si ganyan? O, hindi mo naman pinapagalitan kasi anak ka din yung bawa. You're the black sheep of the family. So, black sheep effect ang tawag natin. You are a member of the group, alright? But there are times that you have been treated this way. You're being punished more harshly than out-group member. Yan. Sige, panoorin nga natin ito yung documentary mamaya. So, pag-usapan muna natin yung bystander effect. So, bystander effect, this is the tendency for people to seek or help less when they know others are present and capable of helping. Familiar kayo dito sa bystander effect. Di ba napag-usapan natin ito nung chapter 1 yata yun. So, nagkaroon tayo ng bystander effect because alam natin na mayroong tutulong. Ba't ako makikisama dyan alam dyan meron namang pulis. O meron naman siyang kapitbahay. Halimbawa, nakita ninyo, binubugbog yung isang tao, hindi kayo makikialam. Dire-diretso lang, baka mamaya madamay pa ako. Yan. So minsan meron tayong bystander apathy na tinatawag o itatawag natin na diffusion of responsibility. Na the effect was initially thought to be the result of apathy. Akala ng iba, parang walang pakialam o kaya naman walang nararamdamang empathy towards that person. Akala ng iba, parang wala nang totally pakialam. Pero, this is research suggests a number of cognitive and social processes, including diffusion of responsibility and misinterpretation that help is not needed, contribute to the effect. Okay, so it is not merely the fact that a person might, suggests that he or she is not feeling sorry about that person or wala siyang nararamdamang awa or mercy to that person na nakikita. Tingnan natin yung mapapanood natin. Crispy burger, gawin siyang dami sindi. That's Wait lang guys ha. Wait lang. Bigyan niyo ako ng feedback kung mabagal o hindi. Kapag ka mabagal at nagpuputol-putol, ititigil ko yung video. Pero pagka tuloy-tuloy naman, natin siya, tapusin natin siya.
Kitty Genovese, a woman whose murder became infamous the world over because nobody tried to save her. Listen to how it was reported.
At least 38 residents of this apartment building heard her screams and did nothing.
That's the legacy of Kitty Genovese, who was murdered in Queens, New York in 1964. Her story is taught in psychology classes, and her name is synonymous with people who look the other way when trouble happens.
Nothing. No witnesses, just a lot of listeners. It's the post-Kitty Genovese era. No one wants to look. They think they'll get involved.
But now, as the 50th anniversary of Kitty's murder approaches, bombshell revelations about what really happened. Kevin Cook is the author of the new book, Kitty Genovese, The Murder, the Bystanders, the Crime That Changed America.
The idea that New Yorkers watched and did nothing, didn't lift a finger to help this poor dying girl, stuck in the public mind, but it was a lot more complicated than that.
It happened here. Kitty Genovese was almost home when she heard a man's footsteps behind her. She ran, but the man caught up to her and stabbed her twice in the back. She screamed, "Oh God, I've been stabbed." What happened next? That's where fact and fiction take separate paths.
He fled, she turned and went back around this corner.
Kitty was attacked by a man named Winston Mosley. The author says the fact that she was able to walk after the initial attack probably led people to believe they didn't have to call the cops.
People are looking out their windows. They see Kitty Genovese here. They see her struggle to her feet. She staggers around this corner into the darkness and is no longer visible to the people.
She's no longer visible to the people over here. It was past 3 a.m. Thinking the trouble was over, people went back to bed. They were unaware that a wounded Kitty Genovese was still in mortal danger.
Kitty sought shelter in here. She was able to get into this door.
That's when Mosley returned and raped and stabbed Kitty to death in this vestibule. According to Cook, a man at the top of the stairs saw it happen, but did nothing to stop it. A tragic story, but it got much worse 2 weeks later when a front-page story in the New York Times declared 37 who saw murder didn't call the police. The author says that number was totally distorted.
There were certainly dozens of ear witnesses and eyewitnesses, but when you talk about the people who both heard something or saw something and knew what it meant, knew what was going on, I don't think it's more than half a dozen.
And Cook says one neighborhood man remembers his dad calling the cops on that fateful night.
He swears that his father did call the police, was put on hold, told the police, there's a woman staggering around out there, she's been beaten up, you need to come. There was no answer to that call. In those days, there was no 911 system. That's something that grew out of the Kitty Genovese case.
So the legend of Kitty Genovese was born.
Led to many sermons in churches, it led to gossip, it went viral in the way that things could in 1964.
Winston Mosley was arrested 6 days after the murder. He's been in prison ever since. And right or wrong, Kitty Genovese is remembered for what people didn't do to help her.
The phrase that came out of this was, I didn't want to get involved.
Okay, so first time yun meron tayong video presentation. So, yeah. So we try to understand that there are some instances that people may not get involved with this situation, possibly because of the impending harm that could possibly be, take effect during the situation. O kung kayo yung nasa sitwasyon, merong sumisigaw, merong nagsusumigaw dun sa merong nagsusumigaw dun sa kapitbahay ninyo, na tulong, o di ba? Anong gagawin ninyo? Di ba? Minsan titingin tayo. Yun naman sa kontekstong Pilipino, di ba? Minsan, titingnan natin, makikiusosyo tayo, kung ano yung nakikita, kung ano yung nangyayari. Tapos minsan, pipigilan natin. Mas okay naman yun. O kaya naman, tatawag tayo ng barangay. O kaya tatawag tayo ng authority to respond to the situation. Kung kayo nasa sitwasyon ng biktima, I mean, kung nandun kayo sa konteksto ng biktima, ano kayong gagawin ninyo? Kung kayo yung kapitbahay, o kung kayo yung kalapit na apartment, anong gagawin ninyo? Magsasawalang kibo na lang ba? O tatawag ba kayo ng authority? Ayan. Anong gagawin ninyo? Sir, wala po. So, minsan, ganda lang yung response natin. Wala po. Ano pong gagawin? O kaya naman, minsan kasi, di ba, parang ayaw natin maniwala. Kasi yung iba nagpa-prank. Di ba, parang hindi natin alam kung tama ba o hindi. Minsan, kapag katatawag ng bombero, may sunog daw, wala naman pa ng sunog. O kaya naman yung sinasabi kanina, no, na-influensyahan yung the way we perceive the reality because of the influence of the social media or the media itself. Diba? Sabi doon, no, ganun daw karami. Marami daw nakakita ng crime. Pero hindi naman totally nakita yun. O kaya siguro yung iba narinig lang, ganyan. Yan, okay naman let's say for example, okay naman sabi, wala daw tumulong, pero meron namang tumulong. So yan, anong gagawin ninyo kung kayo yung kapitbahay nitong si Kitty? Yan. So doon pala nagsimula yung 911, no? Yung tatawag ka dun sa 911 for the government agency to respond in a situation. Pag-usapan natin ulit, yung diffusion of responsibility, a reduction of personal responsibility experienced by individuals in groups and social collectives identified by Darley and Latinis in their study bystanders' failures to help someone in need. Okay, so we try to have this diffusion of responsibility when we are in a situation. Hayaan na natin yan. O kaya naman, hayaan na natin sa kapitbahay yan. O kaya meron namang asawa yan, meron namang kapatid yan, meron namang ibang kapitbahay yan, na ako. Yan. So, diffusion of responsibility. So, story model is theory cognitive processing of trial information that suggests jurors mentally organize evidence in coherent, credible narrator, and bourgeois, hindi ko alam kung tama yung is bourgeois to speak the truth. No? Their oral or written questioning or prospective jurors by counsel or the judge. Okay, wait lang. So for the next topics, we will be uploading it on our TV.